Welcome back to Focus on Gaza. We've been looking at American-Israeli relations and whether they are set to change. Now, to give a Palestinian perspective, I'm joined from Ramallah by Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, a PLC member. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Ashrawi. Are you convinced that this U.S.-Israeli special relationship has actually undermined American interests in the region and has actually, ironically, made the U.S. less safe?
Absolutely. This has been the case for the last few decades, certainly. But in the last 8 years, during the Bush administration, matters came to a head. Generally, the relationship between Israel and the U.S. has been marked as a typical tail wagging the dog instance. And of course, Israel has been a domestic issue in the U.S. where political careers are made and broken, and with undue influence by organizations such as AIPAC and others. And as a result, the U.S. was always perceived through the region as following Israel's lead, as looking at the region through the narrow periscope of Israeli interests, of going against even American interests in order to appease or in order to fulfill Israeli demands and requests and priorities.
You mentioned the end of the Bush administration, 8 years of the Bush administration. Towards the end of it, there was a lot of fanfare surrounding the Annapolis conference at the end of 2007, a lot of hope regarding Annapolis. Israel's new foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, said Israel is not obligated to the Annapolis commitments. It does seem to make a mockery of everything that everyone was trying to achieve, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's a great degree of hubris, I would say, and arrogance in Israeli policies. They seem to think that they can dictate American policy and that they can say no to the U.S. without having any consequences or any price to pay. And this has been the case, actually. The arrogance of this Israeli government now is that it is not only extreme right-wing, it is also ideological, and it also has an inflated sense of its own power and abilities, not just to stand up to the U.S., to stand up to the rest of the world, because it has historically gotten away with this and has violated international law with impunity and has been provided by the U.S. with immunity. So now they're talking not just about Annapolis. I mean, Annapolis to me was too little too late, and it was all show and very little substance. And it tried to build on previous steps, but certainly without sufficient political will.
You mentioned encouraging signs a little bit earlier on. What is there that encourages you about Barack Obama as president, George Mitchell as envoy, Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State? What is there that encourages you that the U.S. will be more even-handed?
Well, let's say the U.S. might be less biased. I don't know whether we go to more even-handedness yet. But first of all, the most encouraging sign is that Barack Obama does not have the ideological dimension that characterized the Bush administration, number one. Number two, he does not have to be educated on the issue. He knows the issue. Three, he has a good team. The first positive sign was also the appointment of George Mitchell, who knows the situation, who is a peacemaker, who's somebody who is respected and has the confidence of the political establishment as well as global standing. So that is encouraging. Actually, lately, what was interesting was in the AIPAC convention, normally every single American politician goes to AIPAC and indulges in the most menial task of kowtowing to the pro-Israeli lobby. In this case, Vice President Joe Biden stood up and said, you might not like what I have to say, but the settlement activities have to stop. Palestinians need freedom of movement, and there has to be a two-state solution.
Interesting that you mentioned that. Sorry to come in again. Interesting that you mentioned that, Joe Biden saying that at AIPAC, plus other, what some would call reprimands, pressure on Israel regarding settlement activity. Presumably, that would sour the U.S. and Israeli relationship to some extent, but is a souring U.S.-Israeli relationship necessarily a good thing for the Palestinians?
Well, I think it is a good thing, frankly speaking, because Israel has always acted as though it is a country above the law and has hidden behind the coattails of a superpower that has bailed it out constantly. So if the U.S. is willing to step back to create a critical distance between itself and Israel, to try to reforge its own foreign policies in ways that would serve American interests. And certainly people would understand in the US that American interests lie within the Arab region rather than through the very narrow dictates of Israeli self-interest. This might be a good thing, provided Israel understands that there are limits to its own power, and that Israel understands that it has to be accountable. This government in Israel is a very difficult government. I think it's one of the worst in Israeli history, because it's a combination, again, of religious ideology, of political hardline politics, and of total greed, land greed, rejecting international law, rejecting the two-state solution, continuing with the policies of incursions and violence, and of course the siege and the land acquisition, expansion of settlements, and the annexation of Jerusalem, plus denying the refugees' right of return. All these factors make the American position more difficult. It's ironic that there is sort of maybe a time warp or a disjointed relationship, because at present the American administration is showing signs of a backbone, of political will, of willingness to utter a new discourse, let's say. And at the same time, we see a regression in Israel towards more hardline ideological policies that refuse to cooperate. And at the same time, we're seeing the beginnings of some concerted effort by the Arabs to give some substance and reality to the Arab initiative, and to speak to the American administration in ways that would influence American policy.
Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, it's always a pleasure hearing your thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us on Focus on Gaza. Now, Israel's blockade, along with a cut-off of foreign funding to the Hamas-led government, has left an already fragile health system in Gaza in a dire situation. Their hospitals are running low on basic drugs and medical supplies. Many patients are referred to Israeli hospitals for treatment, but some who require outside assistance never make it out of Gaza. They can't get the permission to leave. Casey Kaufman met a Gazan family who knows that medical treatment can be more about where you're from rather than what you need.
This is the story of Firaz. His parents never missed a chance to film him while he's playing. They cherish those happy moments because Firaz has also spent much of his life in a hospital bed. He was born with 2 holes in his heart, a condition that can be fixed by routine surgery. But Firaz was also born in Gaza. Firaz is the first and only child of Amal and Asad, and their lives have been dedicated to his care.
واحد مثلا هو واحد متجوزين جديد يعني فيش يوم يعني كويس شفنا وكل يوم دواء وكل يوم صيدلية ومش يعني هيك.
This hospital is only partially equipped, and Firaz needs to go to Israel for his operation. His parents say the request was turned down 6 times as the case was never considered an emergency. But Firaz's condition is deteriorating quickly, and now it's urgent.
محتاج للذهاب لإسرائيل يعني هلقيتها بأسرع وقت.
I mean, if you can take him today, it'll be better.
The doctors here have a direct line to their Israeli counterparts, who understand the urgency and accept the request. For Firaz's father, it's a race against time. He knows that even with an appointment in Israel, the real challenge is getting out of Gaza.
الإسرائيليين بيقولوا كاش تكون الصورة الشخصية على شهادة الميلاد.
It's a new obstacle, but there's no time for protest. These are the rules of the system. Assad comes up with a solution. He picks up a poster of Firaz from home. He can turn it into passport photos for this new bit of red tape. At last, Assad gets the permission he needs for Firaz to leave Gaza.
والله ما أنا مصدق بهالسرعة يعني الحمد لله مشيت الأمور سهلت.
Firaz's mother Amal packs for the trip. Only one parent is allowed to travel with Firaz. It's another rule of the system.
حاسة بالخوف والقلق إني بدي أروح على مكان ما بعرفوش بس حاسة بالقوة إني عشان بدي أكون واقفة جنبه.
Now that everybody got their job done, the only thing left to do is cross the Israeli checkpoint, easily and hopefully quickly. But as Firaz's mother is getting ready to pick up her son for the drive to the border, she is told to go immediately to the hospital. The drive to the Israeli hospital only takes an hour, but after 3 hours of obstacles and delays, the journey never began. Firaz Mazloum was not even 2 years old. In Arabic, his name Mazloum means injustice. He leaves behind loved ones who hope his injustice won't go in vain, as more than 1,000 patients here in Gaza are waiting and struggling for one of the most basic rights. Casey Kaufman, Al Jazeera, Gaza.
Of course, we'd love to hear your views on the issues and on the program itself. You can email us on focusongaza@aljazeera.net. Thank you for watching.